how does it feel to be free?
There is no definition to that. There's no way to express that with I don't think any language, definitely not the English language.
Explain
but it's definitely
what it
beautiful
is.
to be with my family.
Explain how critical the information was that had you released.
I think that's pretty obvious, and to tell you the truth, I think Ben could address that with a lot more clarity.
Okay, Ben Rosenfeld in San Francisco, can you talk about what has taken place in this case? I mean, here you have Eric McDavid, who is supposed to serve 19 years in prison. He's being released a decade early. Why?
11 years early, actually, and this was about as egregious a case of entrapment as I've seen in my entire legal career. And I should point out, too, that what they've done to Eric, they visit 1,000-fold on Muslims in this country, so it's very important that we raise public awareness about this. But in Eric's case in particular, a number of FOIA documents were turned over after the case was long concluded, and supporters started going through those documents, and they went, aha, this is stuff that should have been turned over to the defense that would have been absolutely critical to his defense. It included evidence that the government had called urgently for a lie detector examination of their informant and then inexplicably canceled it. There were indications that letters of a romantic nature that they had withheld from the defense were included in their files. But even the FOIA was the tip of the iceberg because it pointed to or hinted at some of those documents but didn't include them. And as his lawyers, we incorporated that into his habeas claim, and the court showed interest in that. And ultimately, that set the table for his release when the government was forced to admit that they had, in fact, withheld documents that should have been turned over to the defense.
Ben Rosenfeld, the informant in this case is a critical part of what happened here. In 2008, Elle magazine featured an article about how the FBI paid a young woman known as Anna to befriend activists and pressure them into illegal activity. It describes in detail her relationship with Eric McDavid and her role in the case against him. In an interview for the piece, Anna says when the group planned to blow up the Nimbus Dam, her role was to track down bomb recipes. She said, quote, I go to the FBI with this, and they said, well, of course, we're not going to give you bomb recipes that actually work. So they gave me about half a dozen recipes that were all missing components. Could you talk about the role of Anna, because she supposedly was involved in gathering evidence as an informant against many activists in the environmental movement?
Well, thank you. I want to point out first, there was never any plan to blow up the Nimbus Dam. There was actually never any plan to do anything. There was a lot of talk, and whatever plans there were 100% the FBI's and Anna's. I mean, this is a clear-cut case of entrapment. It's a case of the government creating and then solving its own so-called conspiracy. The Nimbus Dam, if there was any agreement among the co-defendants in this case, it was specifically not to blow up the Nimbus Dam. But yes, Anna entrapped them by literally herding them together from around the country, by plying them with the material they needed, by sheltering them and providing them food and transportation, and literally gathering them back together and trying to keep them interested in her plans, in her schemes. And each of them, for their own reasons, was trying to please and placate her. It was a lot of talk. It was no action. Nothing was ever done. Nothing was ever agreed upon. Certainly nothing was ever blown up.
So if you could talk about the case, Jenny, why you got involved with Sacramento Prisoner Support, Jenny Esquivel, and how you applied for this information under the Freedom of Information Act.
Sure. I came to Sacramento immediately after Eric was arrested. He and I were partners right before he got arrested. And so I came here just to be closer to him and do support work for him. And that's how I originally got involved in Sacramento Prisoner Support. As far as the FOIA goes, you know, Mark Reichel, Eric's original attorney for trial, filed a FOIA request before Eric's trial in 2007. And at the time, the FBI responded saying that they had no records responsive to our request, which was interesting. Also, clearly, it was a lie, as at that time we had thousands of pages of discovery that the government had turned over to us for trial. So we were pretty busy, obviously, at that point in time with trial, also trying to support Eric while he was on hunger strike, trying to get vegan food at the Sacramento County Main Jail. And so we just didn't really have time to follow through on that or pursue it, even though we knew that they clearly did have records responsive to our request. So after Eric was convicted and sentenced in 2008, we filed another Freedom of Information Act request. And about a year and a half later, we started finally receiving records that were responsive to that request. And at that time, we received 3 or 4 different packages of documents equaling about 2,500 pages. One other interesting thing about that, though, is that the government admitted to not handing over almost 900 more pages of information, and we still haven't seen those documents. We still don't know what's in those documents, and perhaps, unfortunately, never will.
Eric McDavid, can you talk about your reaction when you discovered that this Anna, the informant, was an informant and had been taping conversations, the very person who was trying to instigate activity among you and other activists, and your reaction to her testimony in court?
Well, initially, to your first question, it was as I was sitting on the back of the car and I heard the locks click all the way around on the automatic lock of the vehicle that she was sitting in while she was talking on the phone, as about 8 to 10 different vehicles pulled screeching up in front of me with JTTF hopping out, AR-15s, everybody all ready to roll. So I mean, that was the first one it clicked. So it wasn't. I had a whole bunch on my mind at the time, so it wasn't really a predominant or a huge thought. During trial, that part, after, because I'd read a whole bunch of the discovery and we'd gone over transcripts and everything, and it was difficult to see, definitely, but I don't know, it was definitely hard to see. I mean, that part was definitely one of the more harder rides of the whole trial.